Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisance as all Guru Shri Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to today's class. Today We are very happy to have His Holiness Candramauli Swami with us. And today is going to be a very interesting topic, but a very helpful topic that we all can benefit from. And I believe I was told that it's how to give a class. It's going to be a very interactive discussion. So we request devotees, if at all possible, to please have your cameras turned on, so that we can actually see everybody and we can have this interactive discussion. Interactive really helps when we see each other. So without further delay, Maharaj is all yours. Please accept my humble obeisance, Maharaj. All goes to you, all goes to Prabhupada.
Oh, thank you, Anasuya, for being here today.
I get to learn some tips too, Maharaj.
You can also give some if you like. Okay, so I'm going to say a few things and then maybe read a few things and then also explain things as we go along as I read the different points. So it's coming from a PowerPoint presentation on the subject, how to give a good class. Devotees sometimes become a little overwhelmed when the idea of speaking in front of an audience, whether it's a devotee audience or a mixed audience of devotees and non-devotees. And we've been performing this particular Zoom call for 3.5 years. In September of this year will mark 3.5 years of continuous everyday classes. Maybe we missed a couple of days, but hardly even noticeable. And so devotees have been hearing classes and getting an idea of subject matters and along with understanding a little bit about how to present a class. So this idea came up that one of the reasons why we're doing this particular program is to inspire devotees to come to that point of giving classes. Preaching, whether it's on site in classrooms, in temples, or it's over the Zoom call. Either way, but there is certain things that we can learn. Now, the particular presentation that I'm giving more or less illustrates a on-site class. Like the speaker is there and the audience is right there with them. And there's nothing virile about it. It's all right there. But it also applies to a virile presentation also. Okay, I'll begin. Om Agyan, Timidandasya, Janajana Salakaya, Taksu Militam Yanitasmai Sri Gurave Namaha, Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutalai Swayam Bhuta Tadammayam Dadati Swam Tadatikam. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Knastaya Bhutalai Shimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pastyatya Desatarine Vanchakalpam Surubis Chakri Basindava Eva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just a little bit more on the subject matter. His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, has often said in his presentations how important it is that the devotees learn the subject in a working way. In other words, this knowledge that we have in the form of Prabhupada books, his lectures, and supplementary other forms of spiritual periodicals that are foundational in our practice of Krishna consciousness, which are part of our accepted library, are all meant to be understood and presented And if we have the tools, at least in a working sense, then we can develop a practical way to present this material in a way that is effective and complete. And so I'll mention a combination of practical things and also individual qualities that are required both in this presentation. And as Anisuya had mentioned, this is interactive. So I will speak points and then I'll comment on some of the points. And at any time, anyone can raise their hand. And then Anasuya will call on you and you can respond to what is being discussed, either in the form of a question or in the form of a comment, either way. So one of the qualifications for giving classes or for speaking effectively is to hear regularly. And sometimes we say hear nicely. So the more we attune to our practice of hearing, Shravanam, the more we build the quality of kirtanam, chanting or speaking. So the whole process is Shravanam Kirtanam, that we hear regularly from devotees in the form of different classes, different discussions on philosophical topics. Reading is also hearing, and it's also very important to read Srila Prabhupada's books and the books of our spiritual master, and also get a working knowledge of that. And we use an example, we say read, read, read. And Srila Prabhupada said, preacher means reader. Those who read regularly will be qualified to speak and also inspired to speak. If we don't read regularly, or if we don't hear regularly, then that inspiration and the qualification needed to speak will not really manifest. So hear nicely, and then read, read, read. If you're preparing for a class, for instance, a Srimad Bhagavatam class, one of the things you should read is read the verse, think about what is being said, refer to the previous verses and see how this connects with the theme that is being given in these series of verses, and reflect. And so reflecting and thinking about what you read helps to bring ideas in terms of the subject matter. Now we can fortify that subject matter by reading the purport over and over again. Say you're assigned to give a class the following day, so you have 24 hours to prepare. So you can read that purport many times over. And each time you read it, if you read carefully, you will start to notice different principles. Now, think about what you're going to speak about while you're reading. This will help you to go deeper into what you are reading also. We mentioned that read the previous verses, or you may also read the following verses to see how things develop. But you're mostly concerned with the previous verses. You may also think, based on the verse you're about to speak on the next day, what other verses that you know of in the scriptures, maybe in a different shastra, that sort of highlights or is very similar to the verse you're reading. And with that reference, you can support the information you need. And one of the things you should do is have a pencil, paper, and sitting side by side. And as you get ideas for your class, write them down. Even if they're just scanty ideas, a few words, and something that may just appear up, what seems to be a little incomplete, fine. That's okay. I'll be right back. Sorry for the break. Reflecting, reading, and jotting down points, and then look for, in the holistic presentation that you're about to understand, look for the main points and the secondary points. And then think how you want to communicate those points with reference to others' points from other verses or some personal experience that you have, which kind of illustrates some of the points in the verse. One thing you should avoid, and sometimes devotees fall into that, do not over prepare. Don't try to, if you're doing a class the next day, don't spend 24 hours or 22 hours preparing for the class. You'll get, when it comes time to speak, you'll forget. It's called over preparing. So sit down, prepare, give yourself some time, go back over it again, and add the takeaway if it's required, and get new other inspirations which you can add. And that should be enough, once or twice. And then just before you're about to give your class, do a quick review of the information you're about to present. Okay, these are some of the things on a personal level. And when you're presenting these, your class, try to explain it in your own words. Of course, you should, and it's recommended, quote verses that highlight what you are saying to support, and that gives good authority to the presentation. And Srila Prabhupada would do that often. He would always quote verses in relationship to what he was saying, sometimes part of a verse. It's not that you have to quote the whole verse, but if you can refer to a verse and then quote some of the points in the verse that highlight what you're trying to present to the audience, that will help. That'll be very effective in presenting your material. And also you can also support your presentation with stories. In other words, there is two ways to look at stories. One, the pastime stories in the scriptures, and also what may be relevant in our ISKCON society. In other words, you can also refer to things that are happening in our society, which kind of illustrates or highlights what you're trying to speak. Okay, these are some of the things that you should do. Now we go into another area, know your audience. You can't, if you're speaking to a yoga group, you wouldn't be speaking the same way if you were speaking to a class in the temple. Or if you're speaking to, persons who have just, first time have come to hear the presentation, you may present it more simpler and easier for them to understand. So know your audience. And that's the point you should understand. Now here, sometimes devotees find themselves being overwhelmed. You're sitting on the dais and you're looking out, and you see everybody out there. Some of them are your friends, some of them you don't know, and you get a little overwhelmed, thinking, boy, well, I wish that person wasn't there because I feel nervous in front of that person. The way to avoid that is don't scan your audience prior to your presentation. When you present your presentation, now this is a mindset that is very effective. That is, you're speaking to one person. It's almost like you're speaking and someone is listening. And that someone is listening is just one person. So see the audience as one person, as if you were presenting this knowledge to one person. And that helps you to not become overwhelmed by the different people who are out there and whatever mindset may occur simply by scanning the audience and thinking in that way. So speak to one person. If you understand that principle, it works very nicely. Avoid politics, avoid management schemes. These things don't fit into a presentation and sometimes cause controversy. And what will happen sometimes, people will forget what you're actually trying to deliver, and you'll get involved with management schemes and politics, and you'll lose half of your audience, and it becomes somewhat difficult. Here's another thing that you should also, your opening statement should be an attention getter. The first thing you say in your presentation should cause the audience to become attentive. In other words, you're about to speak about the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so you might say something in reference to Bhagavatam that attracts people's mind. And out of all the religious scriptures that we can discuss, the most prominent and most effective in giving us self-realization, which is complete in all topics, is Srimad Bhagavatam. In other words, look for a powerful opening statement, something that is attention getter. When you're using slokas or verses, paraphrase them or quote the essential points in the slokas. You don't have to quote the whole slokas. If you use slokas back to back, like one sloka and then another sloka, that has a very powerful effect on the audience. You're illustrating it with one point, one verse, and then you support that same verse by illustrating it again with another verse. So using verses back to back is very, very effective. Tell stories, but avoid overdoing it. In other words, don't make your class just a bunch of stories. People will get into that mood and then you'll lose the essential principle. Use stories to fortify and supplement what you're saying occasionally in your presentation, and be careful not to become story oriented, and that kind of buries the theme of the topic, the essential theme, and people get more into the stories. And when you're doing stories, do a narration of the story. That is the best way to present the story. You may also speak about your own realization and your own practice in Krishna consciousness and how it relates to the theme of your presentation. You can connect, as we mentioned in your presentation, to ISKCON, what's happening in our society. And sometimes devotees use songs for reference, bhajans. Of course, there are certain acharyas who actually sing. They'll break up their presentation and start singing a particular bhajana. That's not necessary, but you can refer to these bhajans also. These the transcendental bhajans by the acharyas to help fortify. Just like Prabhupada was doing one this morning. He was saying, what was that? Manaso deho geho yo get you more arpilu to avade nanda kishore. He was talking about full surrender, and then he quoted that statement from one song by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur to back up his statement of full surrender. Okay, more on the personal level. Is there any questions or comments so far before I go down and get into a more personal aspect of the presentation?
Yes, Shridevi Mataji, go ahead.
Just very quickly, Guru Maharaj, my humble obeisances. You said avoid politics and some scheme. I didn't get the second part.
Management, he said.
Management schemes.
Management schemes.
Oh, okay.
Some devotees like to manage from the dais. You know, they see there's a management problem in the particular temple, and it becomes somewhat of a concern, and they start giving personal advice, and this really divides the audience and causes controversy. That you don't need to do. Avoid management.
Yes, Namrata, go ahead.
What you mentioned about paraphrasing the slogans. Can you please give some examples for that?
Yeah, just like Savaikum Sam Faro Dharmo, Yato Bhakti Ahok Sujay Hoituki Priyata Yatma Sukhi. Now, instead of quoting the whole verse, you just say that bhakti is effective completely when it's unmotivated and uninterrupted. So you took the essence out of that verse and gave it in a very shortened version, rather than saying the whole verse. So sometimes you can quote the whole verse, but it's not really necessary. When quoting verses or referring to verses, refer to the essential principle that the verse is given and the support to what you are saying. If you're trying to, you're explaining what is bhakti, so I quoted that verse, but then what is the essential principle of bhakti? Free from motivation, free from personal desire. But there's more to the verse that included in the actual translation. If you want to quote the whole verse, fine. It's not that it's going to be wrong, but we find that those who give classes refer to the verse, pick out the points, give those points as a presentation to support whatever they're saying.
Thank you, Maharaj. Got the point. Thank you.
Raj,
Okay.
Prabhu, I think you had your hand up just now. Do you want to still ask, or yours was answered?
I think my question's answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Raj.
I'll go back to continuation of the presentation here. Now, this is on a more personal level. Make sure your voice is clear. In other words, don't mumble. Avoid You know, actually, so these things really kind of like, really are not necessary. They kind of spoil the whole presentation. You know, actually, so, when you put them inside of the presentation, you really kind of like, it looks like you don't know anything. You're just kind of like trying to fill in with these monotones. So avoid these monotones and avoid speaking in a monotone also. Speak clearly, get into what is being said and present it in that way, not that you're just saying the words as if you were reading it on the page or something without any understanding. Okay. Another thing that is on the personal level, when you make an important point, stop for a second or two, just to give that important point some impact. This is really tactics. So use pauses to help you emphasize what you're saying after you make an important point. Okay, and then occasionally, when you're giving the class, you can also ask the questions to the class. You may also stop the class at one point, and you may also say, after you make a point, you can also say, is that clear? Or you can ask the class if they have any questions based on what's already been said. Don't be afraid of eye contact. I was saying that we should think that the audience is one person, but that doesn't mean you avoid eye contact. When I give class, I notice that if there's someone in my class who is really listening to me, immediately I'm drawn by eye contact to that person, because I can feel that what I'm saying is being assimilated or being heard completely. So, yeah, avoid speaking above your level. In other words, don't try to show how intelligent you are by saying all kinds of things that you don't even know what you're talking about. You heard it somewhere, you read it somewhere, and you just want to impress people by somehow or other making them think you know a lot by speaking some high philosophy. Speak according to your level. And if you're studying, study. You can also refer to the acharyas to supplement some of your points like that. Here's another thing you shouldn't do. Sometimes devotees do that. Don't apologize before your class. Well, I'm so fallen, but I was asked to give a class. So please, just be a little patient with me. I don't know so much. To avoid all of that thing, you just bring the class down. Like that. Don't apologize, especially before your class or even during the class. Use facial expressions and bodily gestures. They also help to emphasize. There's some people who speak with their hands constantly, because certain cultures around the world are more animated in their presentations. We're using bodily gestures, but everyone should use something in order to highlight, and facial expressions also. Understand what you're doing is for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and do it as a service. pray to Srila Prabhupada. You can do that while you're giving the class, before you give the class, just to get his mercy. This is very effective. This is something that I find very helpful. I realize I need Prabhupada's mercy in order to make this presentation satisfactory. So I pray to Srila Prabhupada, and I find that the words that I need to say come automatically simply by that effort. The Srila Prabhupada actually is giving the class, and we are simply his instrument. So he wants that we give the best possible class that we could give. So he's there to help us, but we have to pray to him in order to connect with him, so he can also enter into our consciousness and give the inspiration that we need in giving the class. Avoid distracting actions, Don't do things that distract the audience away from the class. Like, I don't know what you would do, but there's devotees who may be doing other things while they're speaking, or something that causes people to get distracted. Avoid that. Use some humor, but be careful not to overdo it. Humor can backfire on you also. So a little humor is good. Some of us are not inclined to that, so don't worry, you don't have to use humor, but it helps. When humor is applied to the presentation, it helps to reconnect people if they're not connected to what you're saying. Humor sort of gets the attention. And as soon as you use a very humorous thing, right after that, follow up with a nice point, because people's attention are piqued when humor is there, just by that presentation. Okay, I'm going to go on. I'm going to mention a few more statements, then we can open up for a general discussion. Don't over speak. Try to over explain what you're saying. Say something. You'll see, if you talk in terms of principles, philosophy, verses, and not try to overspeak. I don't know how to explain that overspeak, but it really means that you're saying something and then you try to explain it in 10 different ways. If someone requires some additional understanding, then you can explain it, but don't overspeak. When someone asks you a question, answer the question first, then give the explanation. Don't give the explanation first and then answer the question. Answer the question first, then explain. If you don't know, don't pretend you know. Just admit you don't know and give some references where people can find out the answer to their questions. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. We can discuss both the presentation and the content of the presentation. So don't be afraid to ask questions, because you might find yourself, and you should find yourself, in a situation where you will have an opportunity to speak Krishna consciousness. And devotees should be eager. If someone says, can you give a class? You should be considered that, wow, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity for me to speak Krishna consciousness, to help others. And don't be afraid, because if you know that it's not you completely, you're making the effort, the acharyas and your acquired intelligence is supporting you in your presentation. Be yourself. Don't try to present Don't try to imitate other people who speak in a certain way. Present it in the way that is natural for you.
Maharaj, there's a question in the chat by Nashringa Leela. She says she's asking, I've heard that the end of a class should always finish with the connection to the chanting of the holy name. Is that a must?
The ending of the class should be a summarization of what you already presented. Summarize whatever you presented in a few sentences, or you can add that principle of chanting the holy name to that summarization, because that fits anywhere, but you should definitely summarize what you said.
And another thing, Prikshit made a comment. She says, dear devotees, please don't forget to address Maharaj first before your question. Please accept my humble obeisance, all good Shri Prabhupada, with all due humility, your servant Prikshit Das.
What did that exactly mean?
Maharaj, I think he has to speak. Is he coming on to explain himself? Where is he? There he is.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, we accept our humble obeisance, all glories to your Prabhupada. But normally when we are addressing Guru, we say, please accept my humble obeisance, all glories to your Prabhupada. And I was listening, and nobody had said that. So I was just trying, I wasn't expecting to put it out for devotees to read it and say, you know, he's still a spiritual master, and this is how we express in this kind. When you're asking a question, you say, please accept my humble obeisance as well. So I was reminding devotees, you know, put it in before you ask a question. That's all. I didn't want anything else. And if that's interrupting, then I apologize. I'm sorry. Hare Krishna.
That's nice, but I don't think it's required. It can also cause people to get a little bit distracted. Usually when there is a discussion going on, you keep the mood of that discussion alive. Just like a person may ask a question and they'll say, well, thank you for your class. Well, my question is like that. And they can refer to the person as Maharaj or Prabhu, like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Better not to refer to the person if it's your spiritual master. Better not to refer to the person as your spiritual master in a general class, because then it's not wrong, but again, some other people don't have that same relationship, just to avoid, you know, thinking yourself so special that you're the disciple, you know.
Okay, well, I'm glad I put it out because it's actually gotten a response from people we all can learn from. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Raj Prabhu, go ahead.
Maharaj, you said you talked about don't overspeak or over-explain. I was wondering is it acceptable to discuss a point from different angles of vision? So you might explain it 5 times, but it might be from a completely different angle of vision each time.
That's generally done in a discussion type of setting. But when you're giving a class and the verse pretty much is emphasizing a particular angle, you want to emphasize that angle according to the presentation. But you could highlight another angle of vision just to fortify the main angle of vision and not to take away from that. Just like it says that you know, if you're giving a class and it says that let me think how to present this. You know, if the purport, it says that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, that women, Sudra, Vaishyas, And others, even though they are low-born, can take to the process of Krishna consciousness. So that verse is there. So you can't say the verse is wrong, but you can say that once you take to Krishna consciousness, none of these things apply anymore. So from a material point of view, there are gradations, and then verses in the Shastras may make that distinction. It's like Kirata Hunam Palinda Pukasaram Berisambhava Yavyali Saraya Jane Upasrayas Rayas Sudanti Prabhavishnavena Maha. So it lists these different races that are considered to be below the Varnashram Dharma. But they can also come to the perfectional point by taking shelter of a pure devotee and engaging in Krishna consciousness. So you don't want to make the emphasis of the inequality within the material, but you want to show the point that as soon as inequality in the material way is overcome by spiritual practice, then inequality doesn't apply anymore because it's material. Material world is full of inequality. And if we highlight inequality within the spiritual context, then we don't really understand the principle of spirituality, which overshadows any inequality. But sometimes these points are made, just like that verse we quoted. I think it's 728 in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Shriya Vaisas Tata Sudra Yepi Suparam Gatim, that even Sudras, women, Vaishnavas, and others who are below this can actually come to the point of perfection. So you can't say that verse is wrong, but they're speaking from a material point of view. So these distinctions have to be clarified so you know what is the difference between material and spiritual. And how spiritual equalizes everyone in the way that anyone can reach perfection in spiritual life, no matter what their material situation is. Where Lord Chaitanya even brought a dog, 2 dogs, back to Godhead. But what is the qualification of a dog? A dog can't practice Krishna consciousness, but if he gets the mercy of the Supreme Lord, then that overshadows the fact that he's unable to practice Krishna consciousness. So these dichotomies that appear within the verses based on material considerations, when connected with this process of bhakti, no longer apply.
Very much, Maharaj.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Raj Prabhu. Yes, Shrimati, go ahead with your question.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances of Vishnu Prabhupada. Guru Maharaj, is there any qualification for a preacher? Like suppose, for example, one has a enthusiasm or eagerness to give class or to preach, but he doesn't have any platform to speak or don't get any invitation at all. So I guess these two are different questions, but yeah, I was wondering about that.
What is the qualification to speak?
Yeah.
Well, that can be answered in a very broad way. Well, Prabhupada Lord Chaitanya has given the formula: whoever you meet, tell him about Krishna. Whoever you meet, teach him to chant Hare Krishna. So that's there for everyone. But to give a formal class, then especially in the temple, generally the persons have to be at least first initiated. There was this program, somebody wanted to start this program in our temples that everybody can give class, no matter who they want. All they have to do is want to give class. But then that idea was fallacious, because anybody who just comes up and gives class, you never know what they're going to speak on, and then whether they're qualified to give class. So we are speaking here of some of the qualifications, but on a personal level, at least within the society, one should be first initiated. And for those who are not, they can learn. And then when they get first initiated, they may also have an opportunity to give class. Usually we ask the devotees who are practicing Krishna consciousness, like the sannyasis or the gurus, to speak. And it's always, that is the etiquette. Just like if there are many people there to give class, the person who is organizing the class should choose the one who is most advanced and most qualified to give class. And if there are many, then it doesn't matter which one he chooses, as long as he chooses someone who is qualified. So we have to know a little bit. This is part of the management scheme in presenting classes within the society.
Yes, good Maharaj.
But
Good
if you want to give class, then qualify yourself. Read Prabhupada's books. Study these books. Practice amongst your peer groups to speak. Have little discussions in your own homes within your own environment with other devotees. This will help. This will inspire you to speak and in a more effective way.
Yes, good Maharaj. Yeah. I have one more question. Like, while preparing for the class, can we refer to the previous lectures or senior devotees lectures or Maharaj's lectures?
Yeah, that's reference. Yeah.
Okay.
But make sure what you refer to supports what you're trying to say. But make sure what that person is saying actually complements what you're trying to say, and it's not something outside of what you're trying to say. Don't look for that thin line to connect it. It should be clear, if you're going to do that. It has to illustrate and complement and support your point.
Yes, good Maharaj.
Sukha Prabhu, I think you had a hand up just now too. Was your question answered?
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Actually, yeah, partly it has been answered, but I still have one more question, Guru Maharaj. I'm talking about myself, not very good with the shlokas, all of them remembering. I read it and then I forget it. So if I have to use the shlokas in my class, how do I refer them back? How do I remember where did I read it? Because it's very difficult to find out where did I read that before. Is there any ways I can get help with?
Try to prepare ahead of time. If you're going to use these slokas, have them ready. Prepare ahead of time, even if you can't quote the whole sloka. And you don't have to quote the Sanskrit, that's not necessary. But at least you should quote the translation, even in a abbreviated way, where you capture the essence of what the sloka is saying. That's it. But these things you should prepare for ahead of time. If something comes to your mind while you're speaking and it makes sense, then you can all of a sudden present that. But sometimes, just like sometimes even Prabhupada will refer to a sloka and then he'll forget some of the points in the sloka. But but he'll somehow or other present it anyway. And sometimes he presents the sloka with different words that are actually part of the sloka, just to illustrate. I'll give you an example. There's that verse that's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which talks about that the love of God exists within the hearts of all living entities. And the verse is Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Savo. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Savo Karanoi. Shravanadi Siddhi Chitte Koriye Udoy. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Ravana, I can't remember the next line. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. Sravanadi Siddhi Chitte Koriye Udoy. Well, Prabhupada would say Nitya Siddha Krishna Bhakti. He won't say Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. He says Nitya Siddha Krishna Bhakti. He'll quote that same verse. And it doesn't take away from the verse. It's a different word in the verse, but it means the same thing. Prema and Bhakti pretty much complement each other when used interspersed. Krishna Prema Sadhu Kavunoi, Shravanadi Siddhi Chitte Koriye Udoy. In the hearts of all living beings, pure love for God exists. So Prabhupada will quote the verse a little different, but that doesn't take away from it. Or sometimes even a devotee will forget the actual Sanskrit, but he remembers the points. So don't get so much caught up on the Sanskrit. It's more important to give the points that that verse is saying.
That will help. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yes, Namrata Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. So, Guru Maharaj, you mentioned that when we are making an important point, we should pause for a while. So, when we are making an important point, we should pause for a while. So, in the same way, can we use repeating that point if we are making that important point?
Yeah, that's the same thing. Yeah, it has the same effect.
Okay.
Nice point. That's a very good. You can say it and then you can repeat it for emphasis. Pausing also gives them a chance to assimilate that point that you said, instead of going on to the next point. If you want to emphasize something, pause or repeat it.
Yes, Raj Prabhu. Go ahead. Perfect.
I have a comment and a question. A quick comment on what was just being discussed between Maharaj and Namrata Mataji. I noticed that when Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu is making a point, he often precedes by something like, now listen very carefully, and then makes his point. Yeah, so I just thought I'd add that in. My question was, Maharaj, at the beginning of your class, you mentioned that when we should be regularly reading Srila Prabhupada's books, but we should be reading with a working knowledge. Can you explain a bit more by what you mean by we should be regularly reading with a working knowledge?
Trying to understand what you're reading.
Okay.
Yeah, not just reading the words, but try to understand. You may also go back and read the same sentence again, just for clarification or further knowledge. Yeah. So, yeah, if we don't understand, then we're in a position to read again, or at least if it's available, ask someone about what you just read. But if you're going to give a class based on what you're reading, you should have some understanding of what it means. You can't say, well, I just read that. What does it mean? I don't know, but it's there in the verse. You can read it too, and you'll see what you can find out of it. I don't know really, but it's really an enigma for me, but you can figure it out.
Maharaj.
Thank you,
Then
Raj, for, sorry, Marge.
You want to avoid that point. Don't make a point that you can't explain.
Thank you, Raj, for a very good question. I'm sure some of us have bumped ourselves into that situation. Sridevi Mataji, sorry, Marge.
Don't memorize. Learn to read, understand, and explain in your own words. Memorization comes when you need it in the verses, when you have to refer to other verses. But don't just kind of like write down your whole lecture and then memorize and then kind of like mentally read it. It's not, that's monotone. You want to avoid that.
Thank you. Sridevi, go ahead.
Thank you. Maharaj, I find that when I'm speaking, almost unknown to me, I'm saying things like, so, because, and things like that, almost like explaining one point to another. I use so, and then I say actually, but you have said just now not to use the word so and actually. So could you just explain that a little bit more, please?
So, actually, the answer is, and if you're ready, it'll come. So listen. Hmm. So, that's the one that's really bad. No, I don't know. You're the one that's supposed to tell me. These kind of like fill-ins. When you go blank, kind of fill in with all so yeah, actually, factually, realistically.
Not yet. I'm going blank, so I'm using the words. It's almost like in the flow. I'm speaking something, and then maybe because of my cultural upbringing, I say that. So, because like that, and I go on to the next point, almost like, like a.
What does the word so mean? What does it do? What is the actual importance of putting the word so in there? How does it make the whole thing? It's supposed to be a connector?
Yeah. So from this point, I'm trying to explain the next point. So when I make an explanation, then I say, so by this we can understand that, and then whatever that philosophical point. So that's when I say so, and then I explain that point. So I don't know whether that so is appropriate or it's not to be used like that.
You can do without it.
Okay.
If it's a fill-in, then no. But if it's part of your presentation, then no one will really notice it. So people use these words as fill-ins.
No, not like that, Guru Maharaj, not like that. I'm saying when I'm in the flow of explaining something, then I will use these words, but not as fillers, but it just comes by way of explaining.
Okay.
Thank you, Sri Devi. Yes, Namrata, go ahead.
So Guru Maharaj, we usually when you, sorry, I'm sorry. Okay. So when juniors are giving class, seniors are also sitting or attending the class. When we are questioned, if we refer to seniors, is it okay? Well, question is answered.
What do you mean referring to them?
How do I tell? If a question is asked and I am saying that according to my knowledge, just for the humility's sake, or not just, but for the humility's sake, if I am also referring a senior to answer the same question, is it right or is it not right?
You have to see. I did that one time to a very senior person, and that person refused to say anything. So that was kind of awkward for me. I referred to this senior person to answer the same thing that I answered. I thought that person could answer it better, but that person didn't want to get involved at all. So it just died there. You have to be careful if you're referring to someone in the audience, whether they're actually going to. So I know that that person doesn't like to be brought into the class, although that person has good knowledge. You have to be sensitive to that. When you're bringing someone else in, you have to see actually if you could perceive whether they're ready to respond to it or not. They may not respond.
Okay. Usually, should we try to avoid that situation?
I don't look to do that, but sometimes in certain cases where my answer is incomplete and I'm looking for some additional information that would complete the point, you can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Namrata. Yes, Raj Prabhu.
Maharaj, I noticed that it's on this subject of using silence in a class. I noticed that some senior devotees quite often use pauses and silence, and it's really effective because it's like everyone's like, what is he going to say next? But other times when speakers are using silence, it doesn't work so well. So could you give us some advice on how and when to use pauses and silence breaks?
Well, you have to present that in the right way. If it's presented in the wrong way, then yeah, it'll be awkward and it doesn't fit. Just like I was thinking, the principle of anger. There are persons who will get angry, and the angry carries them into a series of words. And there's others who use anger in order to make a point. There's a two different anger is there in both situations, but one is being controlled by anger, the other one is using anger as a tactic. Prabhupada was good at that. He knew how to turn on anger to make a point that needed to be made with emphasis. But it's not a regular thing. So yeah, when you're doing that, you should have to see whether it actually fits into what you're saying. You have to be a little bit aware of that. No one's going to be aware of it for you. It's not an absolute principle either. Do it or may not. You may do it or you may not do it.
Should it be planned?
Hmm?
Should you Should you plan the silences in?
Well, if it looks like it's planned, then it's kind of, it kind of looks like a show, you know?
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
There's one devotee I know, he used to give class, and I like what he said, but he said it too many times. He would say something and he'd say, well, does that make sense? He wanted, you know, verification continuously for what he was saying. But I like that principle only on when I actually really am unsure whether what I said actually got to the audience or not. But then I will say, does that make sense? But not as a regular thing. His person used to say it all the time, and it became somewhat monotonous. And it was just like he wanted confirmation that whatever he's saying is correct. Mhm.
Thank you, Raj Prabhu. Hope that helped.
We have to perceive the audience whether actually it was accepted or not. You can see, if you look at the audience, you can also see how they're accepting or not accepting your class. Should be conscious of that also.
Revati, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you, Madhuri. Yeah. Thank you for the very nice class, Guru Maharaj. So my question is like, you have mentioned like,
Yeah, now that word, my question is like, that doesn't fit into a lecture.
okay,
Question is, that word like is a habit that we pick up. Well, it's like this. My question is like this. My question is, the word like doesn't fit in at all in that statement. So that's another thing. Like, you know, like it's like these things don't work if you're giving a class.
Mm.
It just shows that you don't know much and you're just using these words for fill-in. But sometimes it comes by way of habit. We pick up these trains of speaking and it kind of like takes away from actually the theme, because we're using words that don't even have any meaning or don't even fit into the expression that we're trying to make. So avoid that word like. It's like, you know, well, you know. So get right to the question.
yes, Guru Maharaj. So my question
And
is,
yeah, so you'll find that communication is a lot easier and more complete when you avoid these words.
yeah, yes, Guru Maharaj. So my question is, you have mentioned like in the beginning of the class, we should not mention. Sorry.
My
It's,
question is like
naturally, it's,
drop that. Yeah, I'm training you right now.
yes, Guru Maharaj. It's naturally, it's coming. I need to get over that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're very expert at putting these extra words in, but that's your conditioning, and that's also due to that English is your second language.
Mm. Yeah.
And the fact that you've been associating with English-speaking people, you pick up these things, and it seems like it's part of the right way of English language, but it's some people's way of doing things that really is their own, you know, idiosyncrasies, you might say. Okay, I'm not going to stop you again.
Okay, good, Maharaj. So in the beginning of the class, you have mentioned like we should not use the words like I'm fallen when we are giving classes. So most of the classes, even when I hear in Bhakti Sangha also, seniors also, they use that, like, I'm very fallen, I'm not qualified. So how to begin the class with a very good note?
I mentioned that the first thing you say should really highlight in a very clear way the subject matter that you're going to speak about. So look for that opening line. Yeah, this is the art of giving a talk. It's that first line should be attention getter.
Hope that helped, Evati.
Yes.
Excuse me.
So we should look for a quote or something which gives.
Not necessarily. You can just come up with your own quote, just like if you're speaking about Krishna, you might say, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, but he manifests himself in so many forms of himself, which are non-different from himself. And that would be an opening quote to set the stage for speaking about Krishna and his different manifestations. Kind of like summarize everything you're going to say in an opening quote.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Revati.
It can also be something cute or something unique or something. They say that God is blue. But when I see the picture of God, I see he's white or black. That's attention getter. It's a little controversy, or there's many different things called attention getters. Just like I'm using the same thing just like, for instance, when we do Bhakti Vriksha, we have what is called icebreakers. And those of you who attend Bhakti Vriksha programs, an icebreaker is everyone sits and we say something that everybody can identify with, just to kind of like get the feel of each other's presence. Kind of breaks down some of the barriers between the people, an icebreaker.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Revati.
Could be many things.
Vrindavanath Prabhu, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Guru Maharaj, as you mentioned in the beginning of the class, that when a speaker is giving the class, he or she is the instrument of Prabhupada and actually also instrument of our spiritual master. They are representing Prabhupada and they are also representing spiritual master. So my question is, when starting class, I have observed few speakers chant Guru Pranam prayers and few only Prabhupada Pranam prayers. What is the right process, Maharaj, here?
Two prayers are very important and should be said. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyana Jana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. That prayer opens you up that the qualifications for me to speak is coming from the great souls. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master opened up my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. The next one, Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadammayam Tadati Swam Padantikam. So that verse, that second part, which I don't use, but the devotees do use it sometimes, is you're referring to the Abhideya Acharya, or the Acharya of our whole Sampradaya, which is Srila Rupa Goswami. Because he is giving all the knowledge that we are explaining, in both in our books and in our classes, is also the foundation is coming from the teachings of Rupa Goswami. So we're glorifying Rupa Goswami in that second one. And then if we go on, Om Gyan, Mirandasya, where is it? Sri Chaitanya. Vande Hum, Shri Guru. Guru means not only spiritual masters, but all the spiritual masters. Shri Guru, it's not Shri Guru. Shri Guru. Vande Hum, Shri Guru, Shri Yuta Padekamalam, Shri Gurun. Gurun means many, Gurun, many gurus. Vaishnav Hamcha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganat Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam. So now we're individually glorifying some of the main acharyas, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami. And we're giving credit to actually Lalita, Vishaka. So all of these prayers are just glorifying the great souls. It's very nice to present your stuff in the beginning with those things. I do a certain version of that. But there are those who are, and then of course, what is that other verse? Sigurundina. What is that? Janu Lambi. No, what is that verse? Can't think of it. When we glorify the Acharya as being the source of all of our success, although we have no qualifications. Sri Devi, you know this one.
Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim.
Continue.
Tamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam.
Sri Chaitanya also, that verse, and then you'll see that Jayapataka Swami adds something else. Shri Gurun Dinatarinam, Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram, Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Madhavam. He uses a few other verses. So this is all nice. Depends on the individual, how much but you should do some glorification of the acharyas, and especially your spiritual master. Like if we do the whole prayers, the Mangalacharanam, not the complete one, but then we go to Krishna, then we go to Radharani, then we go to the Vaishnavas, then we go to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then we go to Krishna. And then at the end, that ends there. But then there's no statement directly for Prabhupada. Then at the end, what I would do is then I say Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale. But you have to glorify at least your own spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada, both, not just your own spiritual master, but Srila Prabhupada too, in the opening presentations.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I think that was my question precisely, Guru Maharaj, that when we say Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, so rather than going directly to Prabhupada Pranam prayers, is this okay to also recite our spiritual master Pranam prayers? So
Yeah, along with Prabhupada's too.
yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nice question. Yes, Mother Scarlett, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, and thank you very much for today's class. You mentioned, I just don't want to misunderstand. You mentioned that one should at least be initiated once before one can give a class. Did I understood it right?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's you won't be able to sit on the Vyasasan in the temple unless you're at least first initiated.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because anybody can go get up there and just start speaking, and then could cause chaos, you know.
Follow-up question. I'm so sorry. Follow-up question. Zoom class is the same as the Vyasa chair, right?
Zoom is a little less restrictive.
Okay.
But no one will put themselves in the position of giving a class unless they actually heard sufficiently. Giving a class is for the pleasure of the Krishna and for the edification of the devotees. It's not for our false ego.
Exactly.
I want to give a class, therefore I should give a class.
Not that. I just meant I should. One should be initiated even for Zoom class.
I think so.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Anyone else would like to ask a question? And I know I'm sure this has stirred up a lot of questions for Maharaj. And Maharaj, thank you for addressing so many of these points. Anyone else would like? Yes,
You know,
Maharaj.
Scarlett, there is exceptions. If a person is not initiated, but they are known to be able to speak and know the philosophy well, then that may be allowable. But that reputation has to be known, not that someone just comes up and wants to speak. Oh yes, although they're not initiated, they are very, very knowledgeable and they can speak nicely. But that's an exception.
Yes, Upesh Prabhu.
Maharaj, I just wanted to comment at the manor, the evening Bhagavad Gita classes are often given by devotees who aren't initiated. But like you said, they're very knowledgeable devotees and, you know, people who've been like practicing for quite a few years.
Yeah, because there's nobody else.
I think they're actually encouraging young people to learn how to give classes and, you know, to bring them up.
We should practice giving classes. When I had to learn how to give classes, I was traveling in my vehicle, and I would with another devotee, and I learned how to give classes by giving class to that one devotee.
Maharaj, are you referring to that Dodge van you used to drive in?
That's one of them. Yeah, we used to travel everywhere, and we, sometimes we'd have to, keep the philosophy alive by talking to each other. So usually the group leader or the devotee who was the leader in the group would give the class. But that in the temples, it's different though.
Thank you, Marge. Marge, if you will allow me, there was if I could share a couple of things, Marge, that I've learned from other devotees.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Thank you, Marge. Thank you. One class that I'm trying to finish to hear is by a class given by Radhika Raman Prabhu, The Art of Speaking for Krishna. He gave a 3-day workshop on it, and I think it was in Seattle. No, I'm sorry, ISKCON Silicon Valley in California. And I just finished the first 2 parts of it. Took some notes. One point that he mentioned really, really nice, which was really powerful for me, was when a speaker gives class, they should speak with confidence, with humility at the same time, because what happens, he says, is when we speak in a very, and I think, Marge, you mentioned that when we speak in a very low, monotonous voice, we lose the attention of the audience. And then I think you mentioned Buddha Bhavna. He was saying now, something you mentioned, Marge, that Buddha Bhavna would always say to catch the audience attention. And he was mentioning that the speaker should be humble, but also very confident in how they speak and project the words very clearly. He did say that one point. And another point that he said is that we should not have our classes become very academic.
We should mix it up a little.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes. Because he says that when it becomes academic, it's like almost we are trying to present a thesis to win the case, is what he was saying. So he said it should not be academic, very personal, very flow, like that. He mentioned that point. So these were the 2 things that I learned a lot from that, from his workshop, The Art of Speaking.
Yeah, the personal aspect kind of supports the whole points you're trying to make really nicely. Examples, stories, these are all part of giving interest and variety to the presentation.
Thank you, Marge. Anyone else has a question to ask? Anything about this amazing topic? It's a topic that we all can always learn and go back and refer to. So thank you for bringing this topic up, Maharaj. Yes, Raj Prabhu, go ahead.
Maharaj, I wonder if you can give your advice and comments on the use of questions in the class, either as the opening line or just through the class. Should it be something that be encouraged or avoided or just used selectively?
You mean asking the audience questions?
Yes, Maharaj.
Well, there was Janaki Nath was very good at giving classes. All his classes were interactive, which means that he was asking questions, and based on the answers, he would be able to pick up and take it into a more deeper point based on that question. So he was good at that, and his classes were very animated and very, very lively. People liked it. And I think they also benefited a lot from his classes. But that's his personality. So if you can do it, yeah. But if you're just trying to intersperse it because it's an idea, it may not work.
Thank you, Raj Prabhu. Marge, as you're speaking with Janaki Nath, I remember listening to one of his classes where I think it was a TED Talk, I think is what they call it. And he was speaking about his health challenges. And his opening statement was so catchy. He started off asking the audience about the kind of gifts they get. And of course, the audience started throwing out, I get, this kind of gift, that kind of gift. And then he took it to his gift of cancer, and the whole audience was spellbound. They were so spellbound, they were caught with rapt attention, and it was amazing. like he had the art of speaking for sure, hands down.
Oh, yeah, he was good. He was very interactive, personal, brought people in, made them feel very much a part of the presentation.
Absolutely, Marge. He was good. I was caught in that yeah, it was a video that I saw online. I
think
was
he-
spellbound.
He did his TED talk like that.
I think that's what it's called, Marge. TED Talk. I'm trying to remember, but it was very catchy.
TEDx, wasn't it? TEDx.
TED. Marge, there's so many TED Tags. I don't know which is the TED. I just know it's on TED.
No, that was TED.
powerful.
That was the TED talk. Yeah.
It was amazing.
One is TED and one is TEDx.
TEDx.
TEDx is not as high as TED, right?
I don't know that, but his talk was TEDx talk.
Yeah, there's two levels. One is TED. That seems to be a more prestigious presentation. And TEDx is not as prestigious, but still important.
Thank you, Marge.
Yeah, that's how you attract the audience. I used to never speak personally in my classes, always try to keep it away from the personal. But now I find it's very helpful in many cases to bring that in, but not to overdo it. That's the point. So what I'm giving you is just some tools to work with. You have to see how to intersperse these things. But there are some fundamental points. Is that if you really want to fine-tune your quality of giving a class, you should be regularly reading and hearing. That helps. That not helps, but that supports the whole idea of presentation. If we're not reading, then our intelligence is not getting stimulated. Philosophical knowledge is for the edification of the intelligence, along with the information that's given. We sharpen our intelligence by reading Prabhupada's books. When the intelligence is sharpened, then things become more easily understandable.
Thank you, Marge. Reminds us of the first of the 9 devotional processes of Shravanam. Back to the hearing, back to the drawing board, as they say. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Yes, Raj Prabhu, please go ahead.
Maharaj, that when we're reading each day, should we try and read each verse with even if we, excuse me, even if we're not giving a presentation or a class, should we read it with a view that we're preparing, at least preparing, even if it's only a 5-minute presentation, so that we can understand it fully and play it back?
Yeah, read the verse, then the purport, and then try to remember what you read. Think about it without looking at the book. Then read it again and see what additional information you got, or if the clarification is needed. Yeah, these books are meant to be studied, not just read. Reading leads to understanding. Understanding leads to application. Application leads to realization. Realization leads to skills, abilities, Krishna consciousness.
Great. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Raj Prabhu. Thank you. Are there any questions from devotees? Any clarification? Any little birdie Still waiting for some questions answered, please.
This is a class that we've been talking about to give for the last month. It was actually inspired by Srimati. And so we chose today for some reason. And I'm glad I chose today because Anusuya is here today.
Maharaj, is purely your mercy. Thank you for engaging me in your service, Maharaj. Thank you. I learned a lot myself, so I'm glad that it fell on my day.
I like your point about over academia. I know one person who is very scholarly, very academic, but when she presents, she just quotes verse after verse with reverence. And there's not much explanation, just the verses, she leaves the verses itself to do the explanations without giving her own understanding of what the verses are saying within the context. So it can be a little boring too. Can be.
Yes, Maharaj, and that's one thing that Radhika Raman Prabhu mentioned in his workshop, that it can be boring because the audience is, and Maharaj, you talked about the audience, because the audience are not on the same level. You know, we have different people from different backgrounds, different levels. And when we just see that, it becomes very, very dry. It becomes very, very dry, and we lose track of the audience and they don't focus. It's just everywhere. Yeah.
Here's a point that came up. I just wanted to see what the devotees will think of this point. You're giving a class and there's a mixed audience. There are some senior devotees, there's some regular devotees, and there's some significant amount of new people. So who should you direct the class towards?
Newcomers, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, you're right. Because everyone will benefit from that. Even the seniors, you know.
Maharaj, I remember this coming up in one of our classes, I think a couple of years ago, and one devotee from Atlanta said that she had the same question, and she was told, if you have a first grader and a 10th grader in the class, you speak at the first grader level because the first will benefit and the 10th will be a review for them. So it's at the first grade level. So yeah, I was remembering that point. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, if there's only one or two people who are new, then that's different. But if it's a significant amount within the class, then some people have this idea that it doesn't matter, you just speak because everyone will benefit anyway. The way you said, what will you say to that?
Maharaj, if I can share an incident that happened the same way that you mentioned, about I think few months ago in our temple, and a speaker was giving class, and he's an attorney, and he spoke like he was speaking to his jury. And after a month, I got a lot of complaints. They said that they felt like they were sitting in a court case and they did not at all appreciate it, because they said there was no point and no ground to the lecture, and they felt like they were in a jury, you know, and yeah, they didn't like it.
You took them off the list, right?
Yes, Maharaj, instantly. Instantly, Maharaj, instantly. Because not only were the adults concerned, even my youth came and told me, Mataji, what is this? So I said, okay, you're off the list. I did, Maharaj.
Good. Yeah, for the benefit of we sacrificed the one for the benefit of the many. Good. Yeah.
Any other questions from devotees? Any? I also remember Maharaj because I attended and I've had this discussion with Srimati, I think about a few months ago, 1 year ago. And I told her that what also helped is when I attended Anuttama Prabhu's course on communication, and he did a lot of role play, and that also helped how to communicate and you talked about the different words, Maharaj. He addressed those words, so like actually in fact, he also mentioned how in public speaking, the women tend to wave their hair and their hand. And he talked about all that stuff, and he was saying how that distracts the audience. So that also helped is when I took his communication course, how to speak and the words, choice of words.
Yeah. Good.
That was helpful. Yes. Sridevi, go ahead. Mataji, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
No, on second thoughts, I think it's not a good question to ask.
Okay. I would suggest that devotees review this class again, because there are many points, and you can see, because every point is not for everybody. Generally, there is some principle that it will work, that there are for everybody, but not completely. You have to see. Because we're individuals, and we have to see how we can speak in such a way that it will communicate what we're trying to say and give support from other authorities to back it up, which will formalize a complete understanding. It's important. And again, as I earlier mentioned, these classes that we do are not only just for us to learn and discuss the philosophy, it's meant for us to come to that stage where we can actually be confident to give a class.
Yes, Marge. Marge, a question just came to the chat, and it's from Anna. I don't know her initiated name. I apologize. She said, Hare Krishna, Ganesh, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. I trained as a teacher, and I didn't have enough of the young age. And I feel a lot of devotees may have the knowledge, but don't know how to teach. Maybe there could be a class taught to devotees on how to teach and how to communicate. Maybe there already is something like that, but this is just my experience.
Yeah, that you mentioned Anuttama's communication seminar.
It's excellent, Maharaj.
He does it regularly.
Yeah.
He's been doing it for 25 years, I think.
Yeah. It's a very, very good course, actually. Amazing.
And he's good. He can communicate with anybody.
In fact, Marsh, there were 3 things that he that really stood out for me. One of the few things that he mentioned in his classes, which you mentioned one point, is knowing your audience. He says it's and he gave an acronym, NIC, needs for N, I for interest, and C for concerns. So he says is when you speak to the audience, you have to know their needs, their interest, and their concerns, the NIC. And that's why when he's given a time to speak, he'll just take 10 minutes, assess the needs, the NIC, and he can just speak. And he's good.
Yeah. Needs, interests, and concerns. Very good. Complete.
Any other questions from devotees? Marge, would you like to end with a round of chanting, or if you have something coming up?
Boy, I actually perceived that you would ask. I don't know how that happened, but I did.
Only by your mercy, Maharaj.
All right. I have to get equipped for such activities. I'll be right back.
Yes, Maharaj.
You're waiting for me? Okay, I'm going for 2 rounds today. Just in
Yes,
case
Maharaj.
you think I'm extra slow, because I'm actually doing 2 rounds. So just to let you know.
No problem, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay, Jai Sri Krishna, Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita, Gadadhar, Sivasari, Gaur, Bhaktivinoda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare 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 Ram, Hare Krishna. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram,
Hare
Ram,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Krishna, Krishna
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna
Hare.
Krishna, Krishna
Hare
Hare
Ram,
Ram,
Hare Ram, 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 Hare
Ram,
Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.